ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਸੀਜੇ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਐਵਰੀ ਥਰਸਡੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਈਦਾ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਹੋਈਦਾ, ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਦੇਖੀਦਾ ਕਿ ਕਰੰਟ ਅਫੇਅਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਐਜ਼ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਦ ਫਿਊ current news that happened, Justin Trudeau stepped down as a prime minister and as a leader of Liberal Party unless by March they will pick up a new leader and then they will decide, and the new leader will be interim prime minister, and then the House will sit down and most likely Conservatives and NDPs ready to pull the plug and we will be seeing the election. ਬੜੀ ਛੇਤੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਣੇ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਜਗਮੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੀ ਰੈਡੀ ਹੈ ਪੁੱਲ ਪਲੱਗ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਨਵਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਪਿਕ ਹੋਣਾ ਆ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦਾ, ਉਹ ਇੰਟਰਮ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਬਣਨਾ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਛੇਤੀ ਹੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਆ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫਰੰਟ ਰਨਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਮਾਰਕ ਕਾਰਨੀ, ਫਾਰਮਰ ਗਵਰਨਰ ਆਫ ਰਿਜ਼ਰਵ ਬੈਂਕ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਐਂਡ ਆਲਸੋ ਬੈਂਕ ਆਫ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ, very knowledgeable economist, a well-respected guy. So he is the front runner right now. But equally, Krista Freeland served almost 9 years with Justin Trudeau as a deputy prime minister and a finance minister. ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਦਾ ਲੇਬਲ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਆ, ਸੋ ਤਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਨਾਊਂਸਮੈਂਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਬੜੀ ਹੈਕਲਿੰਗ ਹੋਈ ਸੀਗੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਆ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ ਕਿ ਹੂ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਦ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਲੀਡਰ ਆਫ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ। ਸੋ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ। ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੋਲਸ ਦੇ ਨੰਬਰ ਵੀ ਮਾਰਕ ਕਾਰਨੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੋਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ, ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਫੇਵਰ ਜਾਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਹੀ ਦੱਸੂਗਾ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਦ biggest news in the world, if it's North America, is Mr. Donald Trump became a 47th president of United States of America. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਇਆ, inaugural speech was pretty because it was scripted, and after that he just off the cuff and just start saying things, and I watched from beginning to end, and when he started signing the executive orders and non-stop talking to media, and some things make sense, some are not make sense. ਇਹ ਵੀ ਬੜਾ ਦੇਖਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹਦਾ ਬੜਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਨਾ ਕੇਵਲ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਅਤੇ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਤੇ ਪੈਣਾ ਹੀ ਪੈਣਾ, ਬਟ ਇਹਦੇ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਈਡ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੜੇ ਕੀ ਪੀਪਲ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਬਿਲੀਨੀਅਰਸ ਹੈ, ਐਲਨ ਮਸਕ ਐਂਡ ਜ਼ਕਰਬਰਗ ਐਂਡ ਫੇਸਬੁੱਕ guy and all these billionaires were in attendance, and Wayne Gretzky from Canada, he was in the inside ceremony. So ਇਹ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਵੱਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਉੱਭਰ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ ਉਹ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਉਹਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ 25% ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਲਾ ਦੇਣੇ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਤੇ। ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਅਨਾਊਂਸਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਟ ਆਫ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ February 1st I will decide about the tariffs. ਸੋ ਇਹ ਹਿਊਜ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨਸ ਲਈ। ਸਾਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਕੈਬਨਿਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਫਿਰ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਨਵੀਂ ਕੌਂਸਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਾਰਮਰ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰਸ ਆਫ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਜੌਨ ਸ਼ਰੇ, not Lee from Alberta, and pretty intelligent, qualified people to advise him how to handle if that happens or if that happens. So ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇਖਣ ਲਈ ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ I couldn't find a better person who is up to speed on these issues and talk about all these issues. ਇਹ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ 'ਤੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਕੀ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਤੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ। My guest today is leader of opposition of Conservative Party of BC, Mr. John Rustad, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ 2023 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲਾਸਟ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਇਆ ਆ 2024 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਲੀਡਰ ਬਣੇ ਆ। ਐਂਡ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ he served as a MLA for a number of years since 2005. ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸ ਜਾਰਜ ਆਫ ਮੈਨਕਾ and then the riding his re-election in 2009 in Nachaco Lakes, and he served on basically practically all the major committees: education, public accounts, select committee on health, treasury board, legislative review committee, and it served as a cabinet minister under Christy Clark on a very interesting portfolios, Minister of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, and so his portfolio was in indigenous people and at the same time the environment related. And then what happened is, they're falling off with Kevin Falcon, leader of BC United, about his comment. We can talk about that a little bit with him too. And carbon dioxide emissions issue. And then he sat outside as an independent, then ended up joining a Conservative Party and acclaimed as a leader of Conservative Party. And the whole journey and what happened in the last election. Please join me welcoming Leader of Opposition, Mr. John Rustad.
Sanjha, thank you very much for having me on, CJ. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's start with you came pretty close to, forming government, and, so 47 seats is with NDP right now, 44 in your party and 2 Green Party, and Green Party, ended up throwing their support behind NDP. So what do you think about that timing and that night?
Well, it was first of all, it was an incredible journey that we went on as the Conservative Party, going from zero to just falling short of forming government, but getting to official opposition. And I'm very proud of what we were able to achieve, especially how we actually have redefined conservatism in British Columbia and actually in Canada. Because 18 to 35 was a huge support base, ethnic minorities were a huge support base, right? We had a very different look and a very different feel for who we were as the Conservative Party, or who we are as the Conservative Party today. And so something to be very proud of, and that we've been able to build. But frustrating at the same time, though, because we just fell short, and now, quite frankly, we're seeing these damaging policies that created all this angst and all these problems for people in British Columbia prior to the election, now carrying forward again with the agenda that David Eby seems to be putting on the table.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਆਲਮੋਸਟ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਲੋਜ਼ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਸੀ, ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੀ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹ just a toss off that they have a little edge and they form the government. ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ came behind, Conservative Party was nowhere in 70 years, and they never got the opposition status, and eventually when Mr. Rustad joined them, and Steve Bannerman, and he came across, and then how they become a official status as a party. And then in a last election, it was like an amazing ride when Kevin Falcon folded the election, and they become an official opposition. So congratulations for coming right behind and forming an opposition. So let's talk about Mr. Rustad, about tariffs. And it's a huge news, and it will be dramatically impacting jobs in Canada and impacting Canadians and Americans equally, if not more.
Yeah.
So what are your take on that?
Trade is obviously a huge piece of what British Columbia is. We in British Columbia, we're very reliant on our open trading that we do. Americans are obviously our largest trading partners. They're our largest partners in many things. And so to have a trade war with the Americans, all that would mean is we would significantly hurt who we are and what we do. In any trade war, the smaller of the economies always fares worse, and it takes years to be able to recover. And so what we really need to be doing here is actually avoiding a trade war. David Eby says he's standing up and he's fighting for British Columbians. He's got to fight the Americans. And I'm like, wait a second here. Don't you understand that we are going to lose tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs? We're going to lose billions of dollars in revenue. It'll take a decade to recover. and you say you're standing up and fighting for Americans, or Canadians, it makes no sense. And so what's Donald Trump asking for? He's saying, hey, you want to protect our borders? Like, stop the flow of fentanyl. We've lost over 15,000 people in British Columbia to overdoses. Why would we not want to stop the flow of drugs into this province? Why would we not want to protect our ports? We actually monitor less than 1% of our ports, of the containers coming into our ports. Why wouldn't we want to put a force in place? This is all he's asking for. So David Eby is saying, nope, I don't want to do that. I don't want to protect British Columbia. I don't want to protect Canada. I want to go to war with our largest trading partner instead. Absolutely crazy to be doing this.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਟੈਰਿਫ ਬਾਰੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਈਬੀ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਨਫਰੰਟਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਰਸਟਡ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੈਂਟਨਲ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕੋਈ ਗਲਤ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਥੋਂ 15,000 ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਡੈਥਾਂ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੀਆਂ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਓਵਰਡੋਸਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਲੂਜ਼ਿੰਗ 5 to 6 people every day in British Columbia ਸੋ ਉਹਦੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਸ਼ਨਿਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ policies ਉਹਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ ਐਂਡ border security ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ border security ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ I think everybody will respect that on both sides like something will come positive and everybody needs to protect their borders.
Exactly. So let's do the right thing and make the strategic investment and actually, monitor our ports, put a police force in place, stop the flow of the drugs, work with the Americans, work with other provinces to protect our borders. Ontario is a success, and Saskatchewan and Alberta have all said that's what they want to do. If we are able to do this, then we can sit down with the Americans and say, okay, so we're doing our work, we're doing this, let's figure out how we have an enhanced trade. We need to get rid of the softwood lumber dispute that we have. We need to strengthen our forest sector. We have so much else that we produce in this province, and we're reliant on the American markets. But there might be a silver lining in this Trump tariff thing, and I'm not pro-Trump or anti-Trump. That's irrelevant to me. I'm pro-Canadian. I'm pro-British Columbia.
Yeah.
So with these threats coming from him and saying, oh, maybe Canada should become the 51st state, I actually think maybe it gives us an opportunity to rethink who we are as Canadians. Why aren't we fighting to have a Canada-wide free trade agreement so that we can see the flow of goods back and forth across the provinces so we actually strengthen our economy and have a sense of who we are as a country? Why aren't we then looking at it and thinking, how do we reimagine ourselves as Canadians? How do we renew our confederation and the various authorities between the provinces? These are the things that we should be now talking about, and maybe with the threat coming out of Trump, it gives us an opportunity to reimagine who we are as Canadians and strengthen British Columbia as well as Canada.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਕੋਈ ਟਰੰਪ ਦੇ ਨਾ ਫੇਵਰ 'ਚ ਨਾ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਅਗੇਂਸਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਬੈਸਟ ਫॉर ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਲੀਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਸਿਲਵਰ ਲਾਈਨਿੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਚੰਗੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਨਿਕਲ ਕੇ ਆਉਣੀਆਂ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣੀਆਂ So, John, let's talk about a little bit about this. So, when we talk about Mr. Eby saying that, okay, he can ban the liquor because the majority of liquor comes from America and some other things, when we do retaliation and if Mr. Trump not back down or Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his team, that's like an ongoing effort to have, they don't want to fight either, except for one premium not join them is Alberta's Danielle Smith, and she have her own local issues with the gas and natural gas and petrol and all that issue, but otherwise, what you're saying, Mr. Trudeau and their team is saying the same thing, but let's push come to shove.
So look, David Eby's got a huge budget problem. And we ship natural gas, we ship lumber, we ship all kinds of products down the United States. We are very reliant on our trade. But David Eby has a huge problem. And it's because he's blown a budget. His policies have failed in British Columbia, and he needs an enemy. So he is welcoming these tariffs. He's welcoming Trump as an enemy because he's like, hallelujah, I get to blame somebody else other than himself for these problems we have in British Columbia. And he's already come out by saying, I'm not going to be moving forward with the $1,000 tax relief that he promised. He's not going to move forward with getting rid of the consumer carbon tax that he's promised. He's using this as an excuse to say, we don't have the budget room to do this anymore because Donald Trump is now the president. It's absolutely crazy. But so when I look at it, I think, if we get to this place, let's do the right thing, protect our borders, do all those sort of things. And then if he's going to put tariffs on us and say, no, that's not enough, and he's going to be a jerk and go after us, then we need to look at taking steps. But what David Eby's talking about is the equivalent of him sailing out on a little dinghy with a pop gun when the Americans are coming in with a battleship, right? It's not going to work. We will be the losers in this fight.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਫਿਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਸੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਲਾ ਹੀ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਹਲੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਜਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ and I think deficit is what 9 billion 9.5 billion
9.5 billion yeah. And growing likely to be much larger by the end of March.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਈਬੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਇਧਰੋਂ ਹਟਾ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਾਈਟ ਟਰੰਪ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਕ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਉਧਰ ਹੋ ਜੇ ਇਹਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ 1000 ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਰਬਨ ਟੈਕਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵਿਸ਼ੀ-ਵਾਸ਼ੀ ਇਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਿਲਾਸਫੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਸੋ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਡੈਫਿਸਿਟ ਬੜਨ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਐਂਡ ਲੈਟਸ ਸਟੇ ਔਨ ਦਿਸ ਵਨ ਦ ਬਜਟ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਜੌਨ ਇਫ ਯੂ ਦ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ announced here in Surrey numerous times. Even we're sidetracking a little bit, but it is related because it's all about money. Yes. Where you're spending all your money, and well, not your public's money. So the hospital is still nowhere close to even started.
I was meeting with some health officials, some of the people working in the health sector just over the last week, right here in Surrey, talking about the hospital here. 18 hours for a wait time? It essentially means you're diverting emergency room. People can't get emergency service here. The quality of service that is happening. You know, if you're an expecting mom and you need to go in and have services, right, prenatal services and these types of things, the quality of service that's being done here is less than what you're getting in many, many other jurisdictions around the world, even in places like refugee camps. I mean, it's crazy. And it's not because we don't have qualified people. We do. We have lots of good doctors and nurses that are trying to do their best. It's just they're swamped. They're completely overwhelmed. And there needs to be a plan to deal with this. And quite frankly, David Eby and this government, they've reneged, they've delayed, they've just not responded. They keep treating Surrey as a second-class city. Think about it. We've got 700,000 people in this great city of Surrey, and we've got one major hospital.
Yeah,
it's completely unacceptable to think this is what has happened in Surrey, and that we should just accept this as being normal.
ਅਸੀਂ ਡੈਫਿਸਿਟ ਬਜਟ ਤੋਂ ਗੱਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਜੁਲਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਪਰਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮਨੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਟੈਕਸ ਪੇਅਰ ਦੀ ਮਨੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਜੌਨ ਰਾਸਟਡ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ 18 ਘੰਟੇ 18 ਆਵਰ ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਐਂਡ ਪ੍ਰੀਨੇਟਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਹੈ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਨਾਟ ਅਪ ਟੂ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡਸ ਇਹ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀਜ਼ ਕੈਂਪਸ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ better ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਹੈ equally stretch out to limit and if you look you're a small town guy you grew up in that area and they regularly shut down the emergency department where people will go.
Well, this is the problem. So you have many small communities throughout the province where emergency rooms are closed, and you're looking at it and thinking, okay, so you can go into a major center. Here we are in Surrey. Right, Surrey Memorial is the major center for this whole area. 18 hours. By next year, it could very easily be 24 hours. That basically means it is continually on diversion. You're continually having to go to another facility because you can't get it in Surrey. Now, obviously, if you come in with a major trauma, a major life-threatening issue, you're jumping to the front of the queue. You're getting through and doing that. But if you've got issues that you need to deal with, you can't get to a family doctor, clinic's full. You need to go to emergency, you need to get something. That's an unacceptable wait. When you think about it, people are going to end up losing their lives. The service is not what it should be. And it's a sad state of affairs. It really is.
ਸੋ ਹਰ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਛੋਟੇ ਟਾਊਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਦੇ ਡੋਂਟ ਹੈਵ ਇਨਫ ਸਟਾਫ ਔਰ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਫਿਰ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਵੱਡੇ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਜੋ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਨਲੈਸ ਇਟਸ ਅ ਸੀਰੀਅਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਜੌਨ I will pick your brain on this one if you will be the premier how you will fix this.
So a lot of things, obviously, that we need to do. There's a whole change in our healthcare model that we need to be thinking about. The way healthcare works in British Columbia today is we're near the bottom of the list of all of the significantly economic developed countries in the world. What we want to do is we need to look at the European models of healthcare, a model where the money follows the patient, a model where we are driving innovation of investment. So it's a shift that's needed in our healthcare model. But when you come to Surrey, we need not only a second hospital, we need to do the expansion of Surrey more, we need to put in a children's hospital. More children get referred from Surrey to BC Children's Hospital than any other area. These are services that we should be able to expect to be in Surrey, meeting the needs, not of Surrey, just of Surrey, but everywhere, south of the Fraser. The strategic investments that are needed. So we would be putting that in place. Along with the combined changes to the healthcare system, it allows us to be able to attract and better utilize the professionals that we have that we need in the area and relieve that pressure on the system. I'm very, very worried about our nurses. They are being burnt out. We don't have enough nurses. When a nurse graduates, they spend an average 5 years in the system and then they say, I'm done, I'm leaving. I can't handle this anymore. We can't have that. We need to be able to have those nurses recruited and being in our system. We need to make sure we're supporting our healthcare workers.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡ ਇੱਥੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਸੋ ਸੈਡ ਇਨ ਆਲ ਦ ਐਡਵਾਂਸ G7 ਵਰਲਡਸ we stack up in the bottom. That's pretty sad. And ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਯੂਰੋਪੀਅਨ ਮਾਡਲ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਲੋ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜਾ dollar that have to follow the patient so that will be to streamline that and then ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਨਾ ਕੱਲਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੂਜਾ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਐਕਸਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਰੀ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਚਿਲਡਰਨਸ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਸਿੱਧੇ ਹੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਫਿਰ BC ਚਿਲਡਰਨ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਤੱਕ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ so inconvenient for the parents and the families. ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਨਰਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ so nurses are stretched to a limit in their work. Actually I was meeting somebody today and his wife work in ICU in one of the hospitals in Burnaby and he said CJ and very young they had a 2-year-old child and he said you will not believe it when she comes from there and seeing the trauma is enough and how they're stretched to a limit. He said, very hard to handle sometimes.
And in Vancouver, the wait times aren't as bad. I mean, they have their moments, they have their problems. But as soon as you get out of the Vancouver area, this is where we start really running into problems. And that's what you would expect from a healthcare system that is collapsing. The peripherals, the outside, the smaller communities start first. The areas that don't have the main focus, like Surrey, hasn't treated like Vancouver, has struggling. And it'll eventually get to the Vancouver problem as well as part of the collapse. Hopefully we can head this off. And this is why, as the Conservative Party, typically in politics, as a Conservative Party, you don't take health care on because it tends to be an issue that is not really strong. But we insisted on taking it on. We insisted on saying this is just the right thing to do. We have to make changes if we really want to be able to improve lives for people. And as a political party, and certainly as a leader, that needs to be our focus. How do we make sure we do everything we can to improve the lives of the people that are in this province? Healthcare is an important piece. Our economy is huge. Obviously, the risks that we have out there, the resource economy, there's so many things that need our attention and fixing. But we're not afraid to stand up and talk about healthcare and talk about the difference that we can make by standing up and saying, this isn't right, this isn't fair. We are going to try to do something different.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜੋ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਬਾਹਰ ਨਿਕਲਦੇ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਫਰਦਰ ਆਊਟ ਛੋਟੇ ਟਾਊਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਉਵੇਂ ਦੀ ਉਵੇਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵਧੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਐਕਸਕਿਊਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਰਿਸੋਰਸ ਇਕੋਨਮੀ ਬੜੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਪਾਵਰਫੁਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲਾ ਹੈ। So basically, let's the last question about healthcare, because we have a bunch of health authorities here. Is it a overkill with the administratives and all the boards and all the I served on a health authority board, so with a first-hand experience, they do a due diligent work. But do we need? Is it an overlap of?
So Germany, which is a country that is twice as large as Canada. They've got 80 million people. We have 40 million people, or wherever those numbers are. But they're about twice the size. Canada has 11 times as many healthcare administrators as Germany does. 11 times. It's crazy. We don't need this. We do not need to have these layers of bureaucracy. And I think it was Mark Twain that said it best when he said the bureaucracy is expanding to support the expanding bureaucracy. We don't need this. This has to be cleaned out. We need to take those dollars and get them reinvested in the frontline services. It's a simple thing that needs to be done. And so our health authorities, look, these guys are trying to do their best, but the problem is they become so mired in just the administrative and the things that aren't focused on patients that it's almost become the most important thing of the system itself rather than the people on the ground delivering services. So when you're doing a service, like let's say you're doing a surgery, it costs $1,000 to do a surgery, the administrative layer and costs on it are 3 times where they should be associated with doing that. This needs to change, and it's part of looking at those European models that are so much more efficient at delivering services at a much better cost point.
So ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਅਥਾਰਟੀਜ਼ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਐਡਮਿਨਿਸਟ੍ਰੇਟਿਵ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੇਅਰਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਸਲੀ ਬਲੀਡਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਮਨੀ ਕਿੱਧਰ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਰਮਨੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਡਬਲ ਦਾ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਹੈ ਪਾਪੂਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਈਜ਼, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲੋਂ 11 ਟਾਈਮਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਐਡਮਿਨਿਸਟ੍ਰੇਟਿਵ ਲੇਅਰਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਮਨੀ ਪੈਸੇ ਬਜਟ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪਬਲਿਕ ਪਰਸ it goes the money there. So ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ that can be funneled in a proper channels rather than ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਾਰਕ ਟਵੇਨ ਦਾ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਡਮਿਨਿਸਟ੍ਰੇਟਿਵ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਫਿਸਿਸ ਹੁਣ CEO ਹੈ, ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਹੈ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਟਾਫ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ to just for CEOs and presidents. Now, like you said, what Mark Twain said.
I mean, there's what 64 vice presidents in the health authorities. I mean, what do you need those for? You can get away. Germany gets away with like 1, maybe 2, right? Yeah. We don't need this, and so all those layers can be taken out.
Yeah. So So ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ healthcare system ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ funding ਦੀ ਇਕੱਲੇ is not only a funding or money, how the money is spent.
Well, and we are one of the most expensive healthcare models. It's not an issue of not spending money. We spend more than most of the other jurisdictions, but we're not getting the outcomes. It's not being spent effectively. We're not making sure that we focus on access to healthcare. And that's what people want. When you have a problem, when you need an emergency or you need to deal with a healthcare problem, you want to be able to have access. You're paying your taxes. You expect a system that you can go to and have access to be able to address it. And that is being denied today by the Canadian health system, by what we're doing in British Columbia. It has to change.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਹੈ the most expensive ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਹੈਗਾ, ਇਹਦੇ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਲਿਆਉਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੇਸ਼ੈਂਟ ਹੈ patient should be first.
Yes.
It should be all about patient. ਤੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੇਅਰਸ ਦੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਸਟਰਾ ਐਕਸਪੈਂਸਿਸ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਾਡਲਸ ਹੈ European, I heard that Scandinavian countries have a pretty good system too.
And what I find interesting, and people say, Americans look at us and say, we're socialist up here. These countries with far better healthcare systems than we have, far less expensive than we have, they're more socialist governments than we are. And yet they're able to deliver it. But the governments have been lying to the public, saying we have the best healthcare system. We don't. You go to these other countries, it becomes very, very clear we are way behind where we should be.
So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਦੂਜੀ ਕੰਟਰੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੇ ਕੰਪੇਅਰ ਕਰੀਏ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਈਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣਾ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟਡ ਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਵੇ ਬਿਹਾਈਂਡ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੰਟਰੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ, ਯੂਰੋਪੀਅਨ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਜਾਂ ਸਕੈਂਡੀਨੇਵੀਅਨ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿਹਾਈਂਡ ਹੈਗਾ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ. So let's switch the gears. I know we can go on and on. I think every dollar that is a budget like over 50% probably go to healthcare.
Yeah, it's close to 50%.
50%.
But when we've got a deficit and a debt the size that we have, and most people get what's the deficit, what's the debt? Look at it. Think about it this way: your personal income tax money that you're paying to fund healthcare, to fund the government services. 25% of your personal health care or your personal income taxes is just going to pay interest on our debt. 25%. Our debt, our deficit right now is more than half of what you would pay in personal income taxes for in a year for all the population in British Columbia. This is unsustainable. We need to rein in spending, but more importantly, we need to get our economy going. And this is why this trade war problem with the United States is it puts us at so much risk. We need to be dramatically expanding our economy, not fighting a trade war and shrinking our economy. We need to get mines open. We have 17 mines in this province already. If we had all of those mines open, just the revenue from that alone would take care of our deficit and put us in a very strong position going forward. We need to get our feet back under our forest sector, cut out the costs, get it going. We need to look at exporting our natural gas and generating the revenue. We need to make sure we have a business environment so that people can invest in this province in technology, in any kind of business that they want to, and have a reasonable expectation for return, creating the jobs and those high-paying salaries that we want to see.
So, John ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ, two-fold problem ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ. First of all, the deficit. And ਜੌਨ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਡੈਫੀਸਿਟ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ like almost 25% goes to service the debt, right?
Just
almost,
an interest.
Or maybe just interest. So ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਮੁਫਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ. ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੋਰਗੇਜ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ we mortgage interest. So governments are no different. So ਜਿਵੇਂ ਇਹ ਵਧੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਉਵੇਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਹਦਾ ਵੀ ਖਰਚਾ ਵਧੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ. ਸੋ ਪੈਸੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਹੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ 'ਤੇ ਲੱਗਣ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡੈਟ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਲੱਗੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ. ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਨਾਟ ਓਨਲੀ ਦੈਟ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਸਟੇਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਟਰੰਪ ਨਾਲ ਲੜਾਈ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ, ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਦੀ ਲੜਾਈ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਇਕੋਨਮੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬੂਸਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ. ਐਂਡ ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ 17 ਮਾਈਨਾਂ ਬੰਦ ਪਈਆਂ, ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਵਾਈਵ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਕਨੋਮਿਕ ਇਨਵਾਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਫਲੋਰਿਸ਼ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਰੈਵਨਿਊ ਜਨਰੇਟ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਜੌਬਸ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ. ਸੋ ਇਸ one question I always, we talk about mines and all these kind of things, one question comes in mind. Bitumen come from Alberta, then we transport here. Why can't we set up a refinery in Alberta rather than transporting by trucks and pipes? And I talked to a lot of people. I couldn't get my head around.
Yeah. In North America, it's actually hit on a very interesting issue, because we have not seen significant additional refining capacity built in North America in many, many years. And in Canada, it's been virtually none. There has been a refinery built in Alberta, and we actually get some of our gas and our diesel from there, from the prairies, and that gets trucked in or gets brought in by pipe. We actually should be looking at building some refining capacity in BC, and that's not popular. Nobody wants to have a refinery in the backyard. I get that. But we only produce about 40% of the refined products that we consume in this province. That means we are completely reliant on the Americans in particular, but also Alberta. Think of it this way. If we get in a trade war with the United States and they say, okay, we're not going to ship you aviation fuel. Vancouver Airport was shut down. Virtually all of our aviation fuel comes from the United States. How is it that we think we're going to win some sort of trade war? If they were shut that off, think about what would happen to our trade, to our transportation, if suddenly we don't have a Vancouver airport anymore because we don't have the fuel. We are vulnerable. Why would, as a province, we allow our people to be vulnerable? We should be producing the energy we need locally to feed ourselves. And it's just like food. Only about a third of the food that we consume comes from our own province. 2/3 comes from outside our borders. Why would we want to not be focused on doubling our food production and making sure that we look after people in British Columbia? David Eby talks about wanting to put British Columbia's first, but he's going to go do a trade war. What we should be doing is we should be focusing on making sure we have the energy we need, make sure we have the food we need, making sure that we look after our borders. That is where we should be focused on as a province.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਮਾਈਨਸ ਦੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਰਿਫਾਈਨਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਗੰਦਾ ਤੇਲ ਆਉਂਦਾ, ਫਿਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਾਫ਼ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਪਾਈਪਾਂ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਜਾਂ ਟਰੱਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਆਉਂਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਪਦੀ ਰਿਫਾਈਨਰੀ ਲਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ? ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੇਟਲੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੀਂ ਰਿਫਾਈਨਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗੀ। And if there is a problem in the refinery and they shut down, the gas prices
our gas
go
prices
sky.
go up and we have to ration. And, like I say, that is not who we should be as a province. We have all the resources we could ever want. We have all the potential we could ever want as a province. We could be a powerhouse. We could be an economic miracle in many ways. And yet we're just hopelessly managed by governments. We need to get government out of the way. We need to create these opportunities and create that future that we can all be proud of. To be able to say, hey, we're British Columbians, we're Canadians, is nothing wrong to be proud about who we are and where we're from.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਹੀ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੰਨੇ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਆ, ਵੀ ਆਰ ਰਿਸੋਰਸ ਰਿਚ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ, ਅਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਡਿਪੈਂਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਐਨਰਜੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਫੂਡ ਹੋਵੇ। ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਦੇਖੋ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਫਾਰਮਰਸ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੈਜੋਰਟੀ ਆਫ ਵੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜੇ ਲੜਾਈ ਲੱਗ ਗਈ ਤਾਂ ਬੜੀ ਘਾਤਕ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ। ਮਤਲਬ ਆਈ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਟਾਕਿੰਗ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਐਂਡ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਫਾਈਟ ਟੂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਬੜੀ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ। ਬਾਕੀ ਜੌਨ ਦਾ ਆਈ ਵਾਜ਼ ਟੋਲਡਲੀ ਸਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਏਵੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਫਿਊਲ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਹਾਜ਼ਾਂ 'ਚ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਉਹ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੋਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ। ਜੋ ਲੜਾਈ ਵੱਧ ਗਈ ਉਹ ਫਿਊਲ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ ਸ਼ਟ ਡਾਊਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਾਲਾ। ਸੋ ਟੈਲ ਮੀ ਅ ਲਿਟਲ ਬਿਟ ਮੋਰ, ਆਈ ਨੈਵਰ ਥਾਟ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦੈਟ। ਸੋ ਦ ਏਵੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਦੈਟ fuels these planes comes from America.
The vast majority of it is shipped. There's Cherry Point, there's a refinery down on the other side of the border that produces this product, and then it is trucked or piped up to the airport in Vancouver. And so I think we have the ability to produce some, but we don't produce anywhere close to what is needed for our airport. So yeah, we're vulnerable.
So
if
that
we get
is
in a fight,
probably extra refined.
Yeah, if it's an extra refinery, it's a different product that's produced. If we get in a trade fight with the Americans and they say, "Look, you guys are being jerks. We're gonna really hurt you," boom, they shut it off. What do? So now what? Everybody has to go down to Seattle to fly. How does that work?
So, matlab ਹਾਸੇ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਟਸ ਅ ਵੈਰੀ ਸੀਰੀਅਸ ਮੈਟਰ। ਐਂਡ ਹੈਵਿੰਗ ਸੈਡ ਦੈਟ, ਮਤਲਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਾਈਲੀ ਰਿਫਾਈਨਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਓਇਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਪਲੇਨਸ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਪਾਈਪਲਾਈਨਸ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ। ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਇੰਨੀ ਜੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਵੱਧ ਗਈ ਦੀ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ ਸ਼ਟ ਡਾਊਨ ਹੋਣਾ, ਫਿਰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ? ਸ਼ਟਲ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਫਲਾਈਟ ਫੜਾਂਗੇ। ਸੋ ਦੈਟਸ pretty serious issues that can affect everyday citizens. Let's switch a little bit of gear on SOGI issue was a big issue. And SOGI issue, sexual orientation and gender identity. And so you said that, teaching materials SOGI 1, 2, 3 and the collection of guides and resources. And these kind of resources in a way that education helps, but bullying and discrimination and all that kind of things. What is the solution, John?
So I stand strong against bullying. Stand strong about rights, making sure that children are protected, that they can end up in our education system and be supported. What I do not support and what I will never support is the sexualization of our kids in schools. There's material that's being made available in our schools. If you were to put it on television, you would probably get some sort of penalty. Not to mention there'd be lots of people that would complain because it's pornography. And this is being made available in our schools. It's wrong. We shouldn't be doing that. And why would we do this? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we support parents. We make sure they support their rights to be able to raise their children. to be able to know what's going on in the schools, to pull kids out of school if they don't like what's going on. And we need to make sure that we are not putting this kind of material available to young kids in our schools. It's wrong. And so we're going to make those changes. It's one of the reasons why, for Mandeep Dhaliwal, who was elected,
yes.
I made him the critic for, education in particular, dealing with these issues and focus on parental rights and focus on getting, things like SOGI out of our schools so that they can be focused on academics. Our education system today has been in decline, where our numbers in terms of reading, writing, arithmetic are dropping. We're failing our kids. We're not preparing them for that future. And we seem to be focused on this ideology that's going on. Bring it to an end. Let's get our kids back focused. Let's bring grades back. Let's make sure our parents know how our students are doing, and let's do everything we can to equip them with those tools they need to be successful for the future.
So, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਓਰੀਐਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਜੈਂਡਰ ਆਈਡੈਂਟੀਟੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਜਿਹਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਰੌਲਾ ਪਿਆ ਸੀ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਮੁਸਲਿਮ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਔਰ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਸਹੀ ਹੈ ਰਚਨਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਵਾਜ਼ ਏ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਸ਼ੀ ਲਾਸਟ ਹਰ ਸੀਟ ਟੂ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਧਾਲੀਵਾਲ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਪੀਪਲ ਵਰ ਸੋ ਅਪਸੈਟ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਇਹ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਨਵੋਲਵਮੈਂਟ ਵਧਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ ਦੇਰ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਡਿਕਲਾਈਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਇੰਪਰੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਵਾਈਲ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਔਨ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ John, like we have portables now and the portables numbers are increasing. Like we don't, and I was talking before coming to this interview and it's an ongoing basis. Like we're not building enough infrastructure and eventually now federal government have to cut down the immigration and tighten the immigration because we don't, all the students, all the new immigrants, all the foreign workers come, we don't have a place them to live.
Well, it's one of the reasons why we campaigned on the idea that we should take control of our own immigration. We need immigrants. We're short workers, especially in healthcare and even in teaching and many things. We need to take control of our own immigration just like Quebec does. Why wouldn't we want to do that instead of having those decisions made 5,000 kilometers away? That's one thing. But when it comes to schools and portables, I can't believe that the school district solution is saying we're going to put kids on shift. So the kids are going to school this year. They are on shift. They're either going, the morning shift or the afternoon shift. That's extremely hard on families and parents. We need to be creating those spaces in our schools. We need to make sure we utilize the space the best we can within those schools to remove some of the portables. But what we need to look at is building schools that are likely going to have to be more capacity, probably taller schools, using the sites that we have to be able to build better facilities, larger facilities, and then, as we remove the old facility, we bring back things like fields and things that you may need to use. It costs way too much and takes way too long to go into greenfield sites. We need to be doing everything we can. And it would save a lot of money and allow us to build more space much quicker. So these are the types of things that we should be thinking about. And unfortunately, in our education system today, when we're looking at building a new school, it takes a decade just to get through and approved, and another 4 or 5 years to build it. Yeah. By then, it's already too small for the population. And so we're not even meeting the growth, let alone the backlog that we have, which is why we're seeing all these portables continually added.
So portables ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ portable ਵਧੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟ੍ਰਕਚਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਟਾਈਟ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਪਈਆਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਨਫ ਥਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਹਿਣ ਲਈ ਰੋਡਸ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨਾ ਯੂ ਕੇਮ ਔਨ ਦਾ ਰੋਡ ਟੁਡੇ ਫਰਮ ਡਾਊਨਟਾਊਨ ਯੂ ਟੁੱਕ ਯੂ extra half an hour just in Surrey.
Yes.
When I talk to you and we have to delay our interview today because, and it's stretched to a limit. The capacity, Surrey alone.
Well, you look at TransLink, for example, in Surrey. TransLink, all of the major routes that have the worst delays, the buses going by, not picking up mums going home for dinner, almost all of those major routes that are problematic are all in Surrey. We don't have the SkyTrain extension. We don't have the additional high-speed transit that's put in. So we've got huge problems here. And yet TransLink is going to have a $600 million deficit coming next year, 2026. And do you know what the government is saying now? Well, we don't know if we've got any additional money for TransLink. That means there's going to be reduced services. That means there's going to be reduced services for seniors, for people with disabilities or mobility challenges. It means people are going to have to wait longer to try and get on a bus, which means we're going to have even more traffic problems on our roads. There's a whole restructure that we need to think about for Surrey. Why aren't we thinking about, putting a ring road in Surrey so that we can get truck traffic and better flows? Why aren't we looking at how we structure this, and let's make sure that we actually get TransLink? I mean, think about it. The NDP have been in power for 7 years. Have they even built a single SkyTrain station at this point? A kilometer of SkyTrain? They've built nothing. Taken Surrey for granted. And I understand why people are very frustrated, and we had so much support in this last election. I can tell you, we are not going to let up. We're going to continue to fight for cities like Surrey and other cities around this province for the things that are needed.
ਸੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਫਿਰ ਚਲੀ ਗਿਆ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟ੍ਰਕਚਰ ਤੋਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਜੌਨ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਮੇਰੇ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਲਈ ਆਉਣਾ ਸੀ ਡਾਊਨਟਾਊਨ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਰੀ 'ਚ ਵੜਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਤੱਕ ਆਉਣ ਅੱਧਾ ਘੰਟਾ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਇਟਸ ਅ ਰੀਅਲ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਵਰੀ ਡੇ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਐਂਡ it's not a reflection on Brenda Locke, by the way, because other day we were at a common event and she said, CJ, you're taking shots at me. I said, no, it's in
Brenda's doing the best she can as mayor.
Yeah.
And, love or hate her, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the senior levels of government coming in and working with the city and looking at what is it that we need to plan for 20, 30, 50 years from now, Surrey will likely become the first city in the province that will reach over 1 million people. Right, we've got that growth, we've got the space, we could be doing additional, but we need to be able to have that support in place.
Yeah, and our mayor, with all due respect, can't do it alone.
No, she can't.
And she's doing a great job as it is, but she need a help from provincial, federal to build all these infrastructures. So we have a couple of minutes left, John. First of all, thank you very much for coming all the way from downtown. You're a busy man. Appreciate that, because our listeners and our community need to know what's going on. What is your agenda and plan is different than the existing NDP? Your closing remarks.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And I loved getting a chance to come out. I come out here as often as I can. I want to get actually on doing some more media out in here talking about what we're doing. And it's, we've taken a little bit of a break, but I'm going to be out here a fair bit more. Obviously, we had to take a break after the election, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with, for example, Surrey Guildford, where we have a court case coming forward.
Yes.
Right, and so there's a challenge that's going on this election.
Can you tell what is it like? I heard bit of news and issues. You think there was some mix-up?
There's no question in my mind that there was irregularities to the Election Act. People voted who don't live in the riding. People voted more than once. People voted who are not Canadian citizens. We have seen voting in a seniors facility that was not done properly in terms of it. There's a wide range of issues that have come forward. We're bringing this evidence forward in terms of this with the goal of let's fix the Election Act. Let's make sure that we have fair elections for everybody. Because at the end of the day, our elections, our democracy is at the foundation of who we are. And as the Conservative Party, we're going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to make sure that we put Surrey at ground zero in terms of what needs to happen. I said 18 months ago when I took on, or almost 2 years ago now when I took on the leadership of the Conservative Party, I said, Surrey will be ground zero in this next election. It will be the center of the fight. We're going to make sure we focus on this as we are with many other areas around the province, and that hasn't changed. We're going to carry on with that fight. And so I look forward to the time ahead. It's going to be a challenging time, I think, for David Eby and the legislature, facing a solid opposition that we are. And we're not going to let up on them. We're going to make sure we hold them to account.
One last question. I missed it. Trump's inaugural speech, he said it will be just two genders, men and women. He's talking about America. What do you think about that comment?
I think, quite frankly, that first of all, with what this province is doing, it's taken away women's rights. I'm actually a strong supporter and strong believer in women's rights. Women need to have safe places. They need to have the washrooms that are designed for women and women only. They need to make sure, for example, in sports, that it is women competing, women and girls competing. We need to make sure that it's safe and it's fair. We need to be able to have rights for people who are trans, and we also need to make sure we have male rights. But we should not be taking the rights of one group away for another. And that's something that we fundamentally believe in.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming. We ran out of time. I think you will come again, as you said. We will talk about it. So John Rustad ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ guest ਸੀਗੇ, leader of opposition, BC Conservative Party, came pretty close to form a government. There is a lot of issues going on in the current NDP government, issues we talked about. ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚਲਦੀ ਰਹੂਗੀ। ਉਹ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਵੇ, ਹਸਪੀਟਲਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਵੇ, ਨਵਾਂ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਨਾ ਬਣਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਵੇ, ਆਪਣੇ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਵੇ, ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਵੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ ਸਿੱਧੇ ਉਹ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ। ਐਂਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡੈਫੀਸ਼ਿਟ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, $9.5 billion, ਐਂਡ ਜੌਨ ਥਿੰਕਸ ਹੀ ਮਾਈਟ ਗੋ ਅਪ। ਸੋ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਫਿਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਮੋਰਗੇਜ ਲਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਪਦੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣਾ ਸਕੀਏ। ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ CJ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਧੰਨਵਾਦ, ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ।